Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You find the links in the podcast description. I've got 4 other podcasts: The Meditation, The Crypto, Learn Polish and The Awakening, Exposing Fraud and Corruption, but with solutions, as well as being a podcasting coach. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today, I'm actually looking forward to this. Not only is she a speaker, an author, a coach, and a podcaster, but I thought maybe she might be up in a tree today for this conversation. Please welcome to the show, Alison Smith.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So you might let the listener, first of all, why I would say such a crazy comment. You might let the listeners know who's Alison.
Well, that's part of the story, really. Back in the 90s, I still do purchasing consultancy, and at the time I was trying to convince business leaders that they should be listening to what we talk about, and they were getting a bit bored when we were getting excited about supplier management. And I started using gardening as a metaphor for supplier management and realized people listened to me, and because they got it. They didn't want to hear all the theory about supplier management, but suppliers are like plants and they might need time in the garden, and some of them end up feeling a bit like weeds, and oh, yes, I don't water my suppliers, I don't give them any attention. So suddenly they could take what they knew about gardening and apply it to supplier management, and therefore suddenly realise there was more to know. They needed to know about it. And that's where your upper tree comes from, I expanded that analogy. So rather than it just being gardening to supplier management, it was all of nature's landscapes to all of life. And I've written a book saying can't see the wood for the trees, and therefore, a lot of my podcasts are recorded out in nature as we use nature as a coach.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, because I've actually listened to one of the episodes, and I could see it was out in nature, which it didn't sound that bad, because you would think. And is it that you have like a microphone, or you're just using the phone as is?
I literally just got my phone. Sometimes I'll have the earphones in, but I found that sometimes that if I've got a scarf on, that can make it even noisier. So sometimes it's straight onto the phone, but that's all I've got. So I've just got my iPhone and earphones sometimes, but quite often you can still hear the sound of the stream in the background, or the crows cawing, or.
But I like that. But I suppose, like, if it's really windy, then, because, sometimes if you're doing a recording, the wind actually destroys everything. So you just don't record if it's windy.
I don't record, or I have found that I've got like a neck warmer that will keep the wind away from it. So I'll quite often put that on and just make sure that the microphone is under that, and be aware of which direction the wind's coming from, and then make sure I face away from it when I'm talking. So I do have to think about, because there was one on St Andrew's Beach where I was wanting to say, look, I'm walking in this direction and now I'm going to turn around, and that didn't quite work, because one way the sound was great, and then when I turned around it wasn't. So then I had to walk back and then sort of say, right, I have done the walk, and I'm talking to you and telling you what happened during the walk, but you wouldn't have been able to hear me otherwise. So but that's not most of the time. It's fine.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's with Lipson, I see, that you're hosting. Was it always Lipson from the start?
Yes, I have got somebody, because I just sent everything to the guy that does it for me. But we went on Lipson, and then I think I could do it myself now, but it's much easier for me to. I literally get everything, put it all in the right order, and then hand it over to him, and then he adds in the intro and the outro, so I just put it all in order and add in bits, and he puts it all together.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so I'll say, there's a cough at this bit, and then he takes the cough out.
Okay, yeah, because there's different types I've come across. Some will go through the whole lot, but there's others, then if you give the timestamp, then it just reduces it, so you're not paying high cost for doing the actual editing. But it is time consuming. I know that from experience. So with the speaking, then, what's your kind of journey? I mean, like, obviously you've done a lot, but how did you start off?
Yeah, I think it was, I was just always quite happy to stand up in front of groups of people. So I did it as a child. I was chairman of the area youth council, which then meant I was always standing up in front of either groups of other young people. You'd go to an area group council, so then you'd be talking with adults, and then, so I think I've always been used to standing up and speaking about subjects I'm passionate about. I'm not convinced that they were always planned at that point. So it was very much more Alison speaking on this, and then whatever came out of my mouth came out of it. And then that happened at university as well. So again, I was chairman of the sort of the social society, but that did require quite a bit of standing up in front of groups and saying things. And then and then that sort of followed me when I went into work. So, and all of that was in, within procurement once I got to work. So it was quite often being the lead, the manager that would stand up and organise the conference, would, I suppose, MC it possibly, and then do various updates. And I was always looking for the means of what metaphor can we use, how can we do it differently, how can we make it more enjoyable. And then when I started to work for myself, then I got into much more training, and then every now and again, certainly during lockdown, did quite a few more podcasts for people, webinars for people. And yeah, I think since lockdown, I've just got to getting back out into the world. I think I'm still holed up at home a bit.
Yeah, thankfully it's changing. And because I saw that your career is like a lot with the procurement, and obviously you're helping others do the same. When I was working in Ireland, I was working for the mechanical contractor, or mechanical and electric. So I was involved in a lot of purchasing, different things. And I could see a lot of people didn't have the ability to do it. And I suppose it comes down to communication and just kind of deep respect. So I'm just kind of curious, because no matter what you're doing, you're purchasing something and having a skill set for that. So what kind of tips could you give us in that field?
A lot of people will come to me and say, "Oh, I've gone and outsourced my podcasting to somebody. Somebody's gone and come to me and told me they're a brilliant marketer, and I'm really upset that they're not as great a marketer as I thought, and I've paid money for them, and I don't want to do it anymore." So from a small business point of view, I'd say don't go with the first person that comes on. And that sounds simple, but what happens is we go to network events and we meet somebody and we go, "Oh yeah, great, I love them. Oh yeah, that's what I want," without realizing there's lots of different niches out there, even for marketing. There's lots of different niches for podcasting. Is the person that is offering you to do marketing support or podcasting support, are their values aligned with you? What's their real experience? How does that line up with what you do and your niche? So I think it's not about the traditional beating people up and going, "Oh, can you get it lower? Can you get it lower?" For me, it's about being really clear about what your requirements are, and then going out and finding out a few people that can assess against that criteria. So once you've got criteria, then you can say, "Well, okay, so I want this person to have an experience in this. I want them to be able to respond in 48 hours. I need them to be able to do this, and this." And then it's much easier for you to go to a few people and say, "Right, can you tell me what your service includes? Do you do this, and this? What experience have you got? Can I speak to somebody, some recommendations?" And you're going to get a much better idea of whether they're a good fit for you or not.
Excellent.
So I think I don't know, would anybody go out and buy a car without doing that? Personally, would anybody go out and buy a sofa quite often? If you think about some of the bigger purchases for our houses, we'll walk around, sit on the mattresses. We might, "Oh, I don't like that one." We'll go to a different shop. And yet sometimes when we go to a networking event, we'll go, oh yeah, I'll get that person. So I think it's that. I think it's just remembering that just because somebody says they can do something, you may not have the same understanding about what that something means. So their marketing and your marketing may be very different. And they may not understand your market either. So if I think about, look on LinkedIn, everybody's niche, so you've got a lot of coaches or a lot of PAs, and some of those PAs are saying, I'm a PA to coaches because I understand how coaches work. Or some are even, I'm PAs to coaches who work with women. Now you're going to get a very different service from a PA that's used to that than if, the PA is just used to working in business settings and hasn't ever dealt with a coach.
Yeah, excellent. And just with the podcasting, because you're probably, I get bombarded with people trying to promote my show, and I know bots, genuine, they have their it's like a cut and paste, and like there's sites like Fiverr that basically they don't get paid till the job is done, and that's brilliant for a lot of services because there's so many people out there that are fraudulent and they're basically promising the earth, moon and star. And when you can say, hey, you didn't move the needle here, it's all a lie, then at least they don't get paid. I know there's the admin side of actually resolving that, but sometimes all these people contacting you, no matter what the service is, people just hand over, just assuming it's going to get done, and that's the last they'll hear from them.
No, true. Yeah. Don't pay until the work's done. I think the other thing as well, though, is that we can get quite mean as small business owners and go, I'm not paying that, and yet I quite often, if I catch myself going to, I'm not sure about that. Go on a minute, what do I get paid? How many hours of their time do I think that's going to take them? All right. Actually, how mean am I if I start going, oh, no, I don't want that to be £50 an hour. I want it to be £40 an hour. Yeah. So I tend to not get mean as well, but I've always been a bit like that with procurement for organisations. So I don't tend to get involved in buying the things where it is about price negotiation, because it's a competitive market and therefore you can afford to swap and change suppliers, and therefore it is about, can you do it cheaper than they can? I tend to do it about things where it is about the quality of things, so you can afford to go, I'm paying more for this supplier because of the quality of service they're giving, or they're more able to match what I want.
Yeah, I remember when I was working in Ireland that I would, if it was a tight job, because in construction sometimes you're going in at minus, so I would be very competitive. But when there's extras, I wouldn't be squeezing them. And then if there was another job, and I knew they looked after me for a few, if there was another job and I knew there was money in it, because sometimes there is, then I'd actually be, and it tends that I was getting better results than the people that was their core job. And I was a contracts manager, so I was actually running the project. But I think sometimes people fail that they just squeeze the penny the whole time and just think, sure, there's 10 others I can just go to. But eventually, a lot of these people, they're actually friends as well. They go to the same kind of events when they're meeting and they kind of talk. So sometimes you're burning the bridge when you think you're actually getting a fantastic deal.
Yeah, one of the things I quite often, on mental health at work, mental health at work week, that's right, is sort of say to people, what about your suppliers' mental health? Because there's organisations that talk about, we're doing this for our employees' mental health, and then he goes, but what are you doing about your suppliers? Oh, what's their mental health got to do with us? Quite often is a response. So I get quite yeah, I'll get on my little hobby horse. So on supplier management workshops I've done, quite often I think I was doing one workshop where it was Mental Health Awareness Week or something. So I absolutely purposefully had an agenda item about mental health for suppliers.
No, brilliant.
And nobody came back and said, why did you have that, Alison? But it wasn't on what the client had asked me to include, let's put it that way. But it felt relevant, so it was sort of timely, get away with things like that. I think it's time. It's like, you know what, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. We're all talking about it, so let's apply it to the subject we're talking.
Brilliant. So I've seen on your LinkedIn the kind of landscape picture that you have in the background. You've got a lovely graphic there, and it's kind of like a lot of the things that you're doing, you know, stories and poetry, NLP. You might talk to me about that, like, because it's actually a lovely graphic.
Yeah, it was basically, I mean, I always look for trying to do acronyms, and it was just when I looked at all of the tools. So yeah, landscape. Each of them stands for a different tool that I use. One of the A's is analogy and metaphor. Another of the A's is what's it called? It's about being obscure. Can't think what the word is now. What's that? The second A. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But it's all that, it's about the being obscure, coming at things from a really different angle. So it was just the fact that I'm just as likely to add in poetry and stories so on my LinkedIn profile, then instead of a sales pitch, there's a poem that explains where I take people from. It's called From Not Knowing to Knowing What to Do. So that's the journey I take people. And I've just done a story that also, or a poem, that also gets over the fact that we're doing it in a slightly different way. So it's not, don't expect the conventional, but I think there's also something, don't expect the conventional, because the conventional hasn't enabled you to shift perspective. So all of the tools I've got, whether it's drawing, whether it's NLP and language, is all about getting people to shift perspective. So I must admit, the E in landscape ended up being empowering and perspective, because it's all about empowering the individual to take responsibility and realise they've got the answer within. And all the rest of the landscape tools are just a mechanism for helping you unlock the answer, because you've got the answer. The answer's sort of behind a door, and logic is trying to protect you, and quite often say, look, I've tried, everybody else is to blame. This is the situation. I am stuck. I know I'm stuck. And logic will defend quite often the validity of why we're saying we're stuck. So every bit of data that we give about that person's a pain in the whatever, and I've tried everything and I can't possibly do anything else. The more we say that, the more we're reaffirming that we're stuck. So every one of the tools in the landscape toolkit is just a way of a key that unlocks your mind to be able to find the solution, because you do have the answer. It's just, I suppose, your mind is closed to finding those answers.
Very good. And like with the poetry, because unfortunately I had a bad experience with my English teachers when I went to a Christian Brothers school, and like we used to call your man Batman because he used to have the cloak and he'd be walking, but he used to make us learn a poem or two a night. And then if you weren't able to write it out, you had to do it like 100 times. And it just made everybody hate poetry, which is a shame. And I just like your poetry journey and how you're kind of applying it as well, and more deeper than what you just mentioned.
Yeah, they're really interesting, because I think both the shorts, I started with short stories and then got into poetry, but they're all done originally for my own personal development. So I am very resistant. So I am that person I've just described as being very resistant to new ideas. If somebody comes and says, oh, this is what you need to do. But if you give me a metaphor, I'll shift perspective much more easily. So when I'm stuck, metaphor will always get me unstuck. So writing a story was always so there was a lady in a castle, but it's quite it's not difficult to go, oh, Alison's the one in the castle, and that's the same with the poems, really, that they just enable me when I sit down with a pen in hand, and it is a pen in hand for both the stories and the poems. So it is really interesting that it isn't a sit at my computer and write. So there's something about when I'm handwriting them, that by writing a story or writing a poem, going, okay, this is how I'm feeling at the moment, what story might that be? If that story is about a stone falling over, or if it's about a poppy and the seeds, stone, or if it's a poem about, just think what else the poem, oh, there was one about this, I've done quite a lot about nature. And so about the tide, chasing the tide. It's just as if I'm able to give myself advice that I wouldn't listen to if I was doing it logically. What I then discovered when I shared the poems was that they resonated for other people, and therefore they could get insight. It wasn't always the same insight as I get. So I've done a paths and destinations poem, and I've done a number of workshops using it. And it's brilliant at helping people who have got a goal and they're not achieving the goal, and to explore the different paths they may be on that are either paths and destinations. But every time I do it, people will see completely different things in the poem than me. So I wrote it for me, but I have to be able to let it go on for other people to get completely different things from it in those words. But the words were written, they're not poems as much as cathartic downpourings of this is where my head's at on this subject. And I think that's why they resonate, because they're not a poem in the sort of the sense that we were taught it at school necessarily, and they certainly don't rhyme. So there are certain poems, I've got a friend who's a poet, and she just writes really brilliant poems that might just be about a wood. And I'd never write a poem just about a wood. It would always be about what's the problem and how can I apply the wood to the problem. So I'm always coming at it from how can we get insight?
Excellent.
Yeah,
and just
insight from the chasing the tide. So the chasing tide poem made me realise that is the futility really of impatience, because when we're chasing the tide, we move forward and the tide moves as well. So we're never going to get there. So there's an element of we are our own wave. Our time will come. So don't try and keep chasing the wave in front of you. Stick with your wave and your time will come, because every wave has its time. And then at the end of the poem, I go, but at the end of the day, I'm the water. I'm not the wave. And then that all gets a bit spiritual and a bit, oh my God, that's a bit big. But yeah, I think that's calmed people down. So quite often in coaching sessions, what I find is somebody might say something and I'll go, oh, and it might be a poem I wrote 18 months ago, but it resonates with whatever the topic is they're talking about. And then, in fact, I had a coaching session the other week. I'd written a poem the day before. And I said, oh, well, I wrote this poem yesterday. Let me see what you think. And the bit that threw me was it was quite a long poem in my head. And she'd only heard it the once. And yet, throughout the rest of the coaching session, she's repeating back to me some of my own words from the poem. And yet I can't remember the poem, word for word. But she was quoting it back because those particular words resonated.
Excellent. And just curious, do you ever write your poetry in nature?
Yeah, okay. Real question. Most of the poetry these days gets done in nature. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, in the same way as that I found that doing my podcast, it's pointless me sitting at my desk because it's just a whole load of logic comes out, really. So I'm much better off. So tomorrow I'm doing a couple of podcast episodes, and yeah, it's nice weather, so I will go out, and while I'm there, I may very well sit down and write a poem. There's a few places where I really love. So St Andrew's Beach, I'll go and sit right in the middle of the beach on a chair and write. So yeah, I've learned not to even try to do it at home. I mean, I can do it at home, but I just feel that once I get out in nature, I don't do lots of takes either on the podcast or I mean, if I have a coughing fit, then I might stop and do the last sentence again. But even on poems, they sort of get written in one go. And so I'll do a sentence. I have to say it out loud. I have to say it out loud to nature, it feels. And then I can get a sense of one of those words need changing around. And then I'll do the next sentence. And then I'll have to repeat the first two sentences. And then the next sentence will emerge. But by the time I get to the end of it, that's it, done and dusted. There will be no changes thereafter. They will all be made in the moment. But yeah, definitely at the top of a cliff, in the middle of a beach, or in the middle of a wood are my three favourite places. You know, I can think of where they are. They're all within an hour's drive of here. There's another one that's about an hour and a half away that's a bit, but and actually thinking about it, they're my favourite places for writing poetry. They're my favourite places for going and doing podcast episodes. They're all the places, well, one of them's new, but the other three were places where I went and wrote my book. So yeah.
And I don't think people realize, like, solo casts are very hard to do. And like I normally just do it for kind of the first episode of each podcast. But there's a friend of mine, Mind Wars, and he does a kind of walk and talk, but he doesn't like it in the studio. He prefers, and then he does the editing later. He puts up the picture of what he's talking. But I think you feel like you're talking to somebody when you're in nature, as opposed to in the room. It's like with the computer just sitting in front of you. It just feels, yeah.
Yeah, I had to do a recording of a training session without an audience for a client, because after March or whenever, they weren't wanting us to do it. They were wanting people to just watch the video. And oh God, it was horrible, because I'm sitting in here talking for an hour. Whereas right, I'm not aware of what I'm saying necessarily when I'm out in nature. It's just coming. And then I listen to it when I get back to the office and go, oh, because I can convince myself, oh God, I'm going to have to redo that was useless. And then I listen to it and go, no, that was all right, actually. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. And then when I'm here, I just have to do the little bit of today, this is what I'm talking about. But I'm on my third series of podcasts. First one was a lot smaller bits, very little out in nature. Second series was out in nature but using sayings. So it's, today we're talking about being at a crossroads, or today we're talking about going around turning a corner, or today we're, I don't know, putting the stick down you've been beating yourself up with. And then I'll the one that somebody left me a review about was enjoying the one where it was treading water, because I took the podcast into the water with me, because I swim here in Scotland. And so the podcast episode is me with, I don't actually know now how I did it, but because I'm there with my phone in the water, treading water, talking and doing a podcast at the same time. But apparently the review said, well, I was in the water with her, I could feel the cold, because literally I'm going, oh, it's cold. So but that's part of it, really. That's the immersive, if we're treading water, because I always think our language helps. If we're saying I feel like I'm treading water, I feel like I'm going around in circles, I'll go, let's look at that saying. So yeah, if you were really treading water, what would you do? Well, I'd put my feet down, or I'd float, or so I think at one point I float, but at that point some of my neck hadn't been in water. So when you float, of course, you suddenly do put more of your body in the cold water. So I think at that point I'm absurdity. I've got it now. That's the absurd. The A. See, the reason I couldn't think of the A was the second A in my landscape stands for absurdity, and people can think, what? She said it's absurd, her going into the first or fourth to do a podcast. But for me, if you're really resonating with feeling like you're treading water, then hearing me go through the motions is going to shift your perspective about that situation. Thing is that if you don't relate to that saying, don't bother listening to the episode, because in some respects you'd be going, this is absurd, and I'm not going to listen again, because what on earth is she talking about? So you do need to pick the episodes that resonate with how you're feeling, because then the metaphor works for you.
Okay, excellent. And with the NLP and mindset, then, is that something that you've just kind of self-studied, or did you do some NLP course?
Oh dearie. In fact, we're coming up for the anniversary, so this will be 23 years in sort of March, April, and yeah, so I did an NLP diploma, which was 4 days, and then, oh my God, this is fantastic. And so I did the 20-day practitioner. Then I did the 20-day master practitioner at the same time as supporting on a practitioner. So, and then I went and did the trainer training. So by the time we'd finished, I'd done, say, 70 days of studying, as in a room with the trainers. I've done another 70 days of support for practitioners, master practitioners, so doing it again, but as the helper. And yeah, never looked back really, because for me, it just opened my mind up to the power of my mind, really. And loads of tools that support when the mind's not quite playing really. So when the mind can either get in the way of finding solutions or is not feeling very resourceful, then there's a whole load of tools there. But for me, it was very much the ones I've taken of being the language and the metaphor as much as anything.
Okay. And with your book then, it's Can't See the Wood from the Tree. You might let me know exactly what you're covering in that.
Yeah, in Can't See the Wood for the Trees, the premise is, if you are stuck and you resonate with can't see the wood for the trees, stuck in a rut, going around in circles, like a fish out of water, there's a couple of them in there that normally we don't self-identify with, and other people would. One is head in the sand, and the other is making mountains out of molehills. But the premise of the book is, if you can't see the wood for the trees, and you're saying, I can't see the wood for the trees about this situation, at one level, the logical level, or the conscious level, you're going, there are no options. But the fact that you can say, there's a metaphor here that has a wood and trees, you can ask questions of your mind about that wood and the trees. So what would you do in a real wood? Oh, I'd follow a path out, I'd climb a tree, I'd go to higher ground. You can come up with, and I mean, over the 23 years that I've been using this particular, the wood for the trees, I'd say that there's hundreds of solutions. But once you've got hundreds of metaphorical solutions, if you go back to the original situation and say, so which of those can you apply to your situation? Nobody's ever going to turn around and say none of, oh, actually, yeah, I need to get to higher ground. I need that vantage point to see what's going on. I did it once with somebody. I was in Scotland in my office, and they were walking around Florida. And so there was gators, alligators in the actual water. But when I asked them, because then all I can then do is be the sort of guide as they're walking around, and I can't always see what they can see. And I said, well, this wood that you can't see for the trees, where do you want to be? And quite often, when you can't see the wood for the trees, you don't want to be in the wood, but you're allowing the trees to be a distraction. Because the person turned around and said, I just want to be the other side of the wood. And so their action was, all right, no, I need to be more focused, less distracted. I know what I want to do with my business, and I'm allowing all these shiny new things to come along and distract me. And it's like I'm in the wood, and every path that I pass, I wonder whether that path will take me to a better destination. But at the end of the day, I know where I want to go. So I just need to stick to my path and not allow any destinations, so any distractions. So it's amazing when we're stuck that we use metaphor all the time. And I would just say, and that's what each of the chapters do. So if you can't see the wood for the trees, there's a chapter that invites you to do a number of different things, one of which may very well help, or all of them may help, but there's a number of different tools and techniques within each chapter that helps you, dependent on, you know, up a creek without a paddle is another saying, the treading waters in at the deep end, out on a limb. So there's about 7 or 8 chapters, each with a different saying, and then each chapter. So you don't need, there's a part 1 that is great for coaches or speakers that would enable them to understand how to use the tools and techniques. But the second half is just, I'm feeling like this. You know, let's read a story of how somebody else has applied it, and then let's look at various different tools and techniques that you can apply when you so for instance, if you feel like you're going around in circles, and it sounds so absurd on the one hand, and it's simple, which is draw the circle.
I thought you were going to say get off the roundabout, you know.
Yeah, well, no, and you do that, to be fair. So it's draw the circle, because at one level, your brain can draw the circle you feel like you're going in, and that circle will have a speed, and it will have a size, and it will have a direction. And so you can replicate the circling you're doing in life on paper. And as soon as you replicate it on paper, then you can say, right, I want to make changes to this circling. So you can go quicker, you can go in a different direction, you can do bigger or smaller, or go round in squares or triangles. And at some point, and this is different for everyone, something shifts inside, because what you've done is shifted the circling in your mindset that represented the situation, and you've got out of it, so you've come off the roundabout. So it could be that it's, I don't drive through these circles. I've never noticed all of the different exits off the roundabout. How many exits are there? I think that's a gorgeous question. You know, well, there's 10 exits off this circle, but I'm not sure which one to do. We'll try one. I had one person, when we were talking about circling, who said, when they were drawing the circling, they went, oh, I'm just circling the moon. Now, absurdity or what? But to them that made sense. And they said, oh, I just need to use, and this is where the science, I don't know, but I need to use the moon to sort of push me back to Earth again. And so they drew, going around the moon, so they put a moon that they were circling around, and then they drew a picture of the Earth. And so they circled the moon, and then they used moon's gravity or whoever's Earth's gravity to get back to Earth. And then it just felt different. And as soon as you feel different, I maintain you've opened doors in your mind, and then you can see the solutions that even 10 minutes ago, before you started drawing it. So another one I'll tell you, because I enjoy it, and there's a brilliant video blog of me doing this. Well, I think it's brilliant, and I giggle away. Is if you feel like if you're beating yourself up about anything, so it's like, oh, it's the stick out. I need to put the stick down I'm beating myself up with, is the phrase, certainly here in the UK. So it's, okay, so go out into a wood and pick up sticks and then put them down. Because what I giggle about is that I imagined when I said, I'm going to go and pick a stick up and I'm going to imagine I'm putting the stick down that I would have, you know, it's imaginary beating myself up with. But there wasn't just one stick. And so there was 4 or 5 sticks, and there was a big stick and there was little sticks. And I was laughing. Oh my God, I don't just beat myself up. I've got different things I beat myself up for. But what I realized, just embodying that beating myself up with a stick, was I'm the one that's picking the stick up. There is no stick in my hand to beat myself up with unless I pick the stick up. Which was huge revelation that when we're beating ourselves up with that stick, it's all us. It's all in our minds. We're the ones that have given ourselves, you know, all of that ammunition. And so we have the power to put that stick down. So I have, you know, clients who have done that, who even now, years later, will say, I catch myself, oh, I'm just about to beat myself up, I need to put the stick down. Because it's just a powerful metaphor. And that's why they work, because we're not getting drawn into, oh, but I am overweight and I should really lose weight and I shouldn't eat those crisps and that chocolate or whatever else. Or, oh, I'm not doing that exercise. I'm sitting at my computer desk, you know, doing podcasts or whatever. And so therefore, we can come up with all the justification about why I'm sitting here working or whatever. Whereas the metaphor is, you know what, I just need to stop beating myself up about it.
A lot of people
so
with their to-do lists, they actually beat themselves up. You know, they have a big, huge list that would take a tribe of people to actually get it done. And then they're beating themselves up because they've, overstretched. And what I kind of say to people is have a what I've done list. And that gives you more energy and you feel a lot better than, you're crossing off a few things and you're looking at a big page, and out comes the stick. Like,
yeah, the interesting one about that activity is quite often people will say, I'm spinning too many plates or I'm juggling too many balls. And again, I've explored that in a blog about, so what's the solution? What would the solution be if we were trying to spin too many plates? And the answer there is to have a plate rack. Because you need to put the plates on the plate rack. And then juggling balls, again, one of the solutions ends up being Velcro on the spinning balls, because then you can sort of put them on a Velcro board. And what we felt was, both from the plates rack and the Velcro board for the balls, was it meant that when people come to give you work, they've got visibility of what other work you've got. Oh, they've already got too many balls, I don't want to give them another ball because it's too much. So there was something about, on that day when we were having a conversation about too much work, the solution for them was making it much more easy for their boss and other people who were giving them work to have visibility of what was in the plan currently, what the deadlines were. Therefore, if you give me more work now, actually it isn't going to get looked at for another 10 days or whatever. And that's the power of metaphor, that next time somebody coming to it would be, I just need to get better at juggling. Or yeah, I just need to not try and catch that fourth ball. I can do 3 balls. Why am I even saying yes to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th ball? I'm setting myself up to fail because I cannot, nobody can, well, I don't know, perhaps there are people that can juggle 7 balls, but you've got to throw them up high up in the air to get 7.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And with the book then, did you self-publish or have you a publisher?
No. That was an interesting one. I tried various publishing houses and then approached Findhorn, who are very much aligned with nature. And so it should come as no surprise to me that Findhorn Publishing said yes to publishing it. They then changed and they were bought out by an organisation in the States. But initially, it is still under the Findhorn press. So yeah, I didn't have to do any of that. Whereas the subsequent one, I've done one, Your Prescription for Wellbeing, and I've self-published that via, well, I wouldn't even say it's self-published. I've done it via Amazon, such that they'll print copies
on demand. Yeah, it ain't as easy as they say. I don't know about with you, but I've done a planner. I have a lot of books in the pipeline, and I actually had to get somebody to put up, and we're doing it in different languages. And they were giving us different criteria, even though she was uploading the exact same thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's like, but it's handy. It keeps your costs down, that you don't have to buy, a load of books and then hope to sell, as well as the actual admin of posting them and everything. I mean, I didn't want to go down that route.
No, I mean, I ended up getting some printed so that, I could take them to workshops and give them to coaching clients. And then for anybody else, you're right. I know the beauty about Amazon. I mean, I'm sure there are other organisations that do it, but But the beauty about Amazon is they're worldwide anyway. So as soon as you've got it on there, you're right from a languaging point of view, but anywhere I can get my English version of my prescription for well-being, wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, no,
you know,
definitely.
so that's the beauty of you can podcast, knowing that somebody can get it. Whereas even with a can't see the wood for the trees, they can get it, but I suspect sometimes it'll be being shipped from somewhere currently. You know, so if you're in the UK, you can definitely get, you know, can't see the wood for the trees from any of your normal online book stockists. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And I think you would in America, but you know, in Australia, you might have to wait for it to come from either in Australia, from America or England.
Yeah. And I see you've got a beautiful bookshelf behind you. So I just any books that you'd recommend, because I love reading myself, and I assume.
That's interesting. You see, the one that I've gone to is the one, because I do some mental health training. The one that I'm going to is the one that I more than often than not recommend for mental health. Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. Because it is about that, not trying to set yourself up to fail, really small changes, and also celebrating success. So at the back of the book, there's 100 different ways of how to celebrate success, because it's getting into your mindset that, oh, when I do this, I feel good because I celebrate it. Because sometimes new habits don't ever become, you know, successful long-term habits, because we tried to bite off too much initially, or we didn't give ourselves the pat on the back when we did it the first time, and our brain then doesn't associate that activity with feel good, feel good. Whereas if we do, I'm just going to do 5 plank. Don't try and do 20 plank the first time. Just going to do 5, I don't know, sorry, try, it's not 5 plank, let's think. Just do 30 seconds or 10 seconds of plank, and then that's it. I'm not even going to try and do more than that. And for a week, I'm going to do 10 seconds of it, or 20 seconds, whatever it is. It's still a stretch, but not, I've done it every day for the last 20 days. Great. Now I'm going to go up to the, 15 seconds. But I'm going to celebrate when I do it for the 10 seconds. I'm not going to wait until I'm only going to be happy once I get up to a minute. So that would be one. And the other book that I listened to on audiobook, so I don't know how it reads, if that makes sense, but on the basis he was reading it, but it sounded like a conversation. I think he was the one that said, I might go off script a bit. So I'm reading my book, but there's other new stuff that's come in. So I'm going to add that into the audio, which I thought was brilliant. Stolen Focus.
It's a very good book. Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
It's just frightening, completely and utterly frightening about, but he's, I'm not normally into loads of theory, because my work is much more experiential. I've done this with hundreds of people and it's worked. Whereas his is, I'm going to go out and talk to 100 people and get all of the evidence. But yeah, it's just frightening.
He's actually a brilliant author. What happened is I got Chasing the Scream by him first, and I loved it so much that I just checked, and he had 2 other books, and I'm nearly finished that one now that you've there, and there's another one as well. And I just like his style, and he's kind of coming at it from an open perspective. He's not pushing his belief system, which a lot of them do. He's just kind of going, well, this is what I'm after finding out, and exposing a lot of the corruption going on in a nice way.
Yeah, I think a lot of the books that I end up reading come off the back of listening to Rangan Chatterjee's Feel Better, Live More, or perhaps it's the other way around. I can't remember which way around it is. Feel Better, Live More podcast, because he's interviewing more and more authors and does very long podcasts. So the interviews are very rarely less than an hour and a half, quite often a year or 2. And you get a real sense of the individual and what their book's about, to know then, oh, that's the book for me. I'll go and watch that one.
Mm-hmm. So just finally, because I always like to ask my guests about the social media, because it's a minefield. And I know you're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and I've seen you doing the planking. You were able to talk while you were doing a minute plank, which I don't think I could do. I was impressed with that. And you were doing another one where you're boxing with your trainer. So your videos are very interesting. But I mean, I find it hit and miss with YouTube. Some of them, it doesn't get the interaction it should. And there's other ones that they take off. And it's a shame how they're in control.
I don't worry about numbers. And I mean, my own worst enemy. I'm sure there's some metaphor I could do that would enable me to be more worried about numbers. But quite often, even with a podcast, or even blogging, if I look at the blogs that I've written, the video blogs I've done, the podcasts I've done, they are all things that I know that I will send clients to look at. So for me, they're there. It's just my library that I make available more broadly. That I can then say to somebody, "Oh, this might help." Either. And yes, of course, I have a vision at some point of it getting bigger than that. But the fact that it isn't, I don't particularly get upset about.
Yeah, you can. I mean, my crypto one, my speaking podcast, I created everything with me. Nothing happens with them sometimes, but I don't care. It just kind of, I think sometimes the right person will find it when they need it. And then sometimes something just, you see a few views on some and another one can get thousands. And it is what it is. But yeah, I don't beat myself up about it either. Just kind of.
Yeah, the plank one. I mean, I think the video blogs I've done whilst personal training, again, is I'm outside, because we do most of the personal training outside. And so the personal trainer has just got used to being the cameraman. Now, that's because they're never more than about, I think that's the longest, that's about a minute. But and I only ever do one take. So it's, I've got an idea. I've got an idea for a video blog. And I said to him once, why do you let him get away with it? Why don't you just say, no, I want you to do another plank? Because you get so much enjoyment from it. And personal training for me is as much about my mental health as physical health. So for him, he knows that I've just enjoyed that. And you're right. It was, I said, I've got a really good idea I'll do a plank. Video me while I'm doing a plank. But it was nearly a minute of plank and talking. But yeah. And then, unfortunately, that then means that he turns around to me and says, see, you can do it. I just walked into that one because I'll do things definitely for the video blog or for the podcast. But yeah, set me up for him to go, well, you could do it then, so you can do it here as well.
Brilliant. Listen, Alison, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
There's a few Alison Smiths around, so you're much better looking for Landscaping Your Life because there's not many Landscaping Your Life. So Landscaping Your Life on LinkedIn, Landscaping Your Life on YouTube. Landscaping Your Life is the name of the podcast. So Landscaping Your Life, if you go to Amazon, will find the book as well. So Landscaping Your Life is the best means of finding me because, and if you add in Alison, even better. But yeah, you'll find me that way is the better way because Alison Smith. No.
Okay, no, perfect. I'll make sure that I put all the links, podcast, the book on both the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Alison.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. As mentioned, you find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com, on BitChute and YouTube, and my 4 other podcasts, along with my coaching, you find on bio.link/podcast. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, it really helps. And make sure that you give Alison a 5-star rating as well. Get her up the charts, it helps. And if you buy her book, make sure you give her a 5-star rating. So until next week, take care.